My name is Michael Ramage. I'm the director of the Cyber Education and Research Center at Murray State University, and welcome back to 10 at 10, episode 108. 10 at 10 is brought to you through a partnership between Murray State University, Grow West, the Technology Council of West Kentucky, KY Innovation, and local partner Sprocket Innovation in Paducah and the Kentucky Innovation Station in Madisonville. Few weeks ago, we started our third year by looking at 5 things that you can do to improve your cybersecurity of your organization. We started off by talking about policy, but then we talked about password. Last week, we talked about user education. This week, we're going to talk about auditing and assessment. Very boring, very boring topic, but it's a very important one. And I want to explain why, if you look at the screen, why I actually talk about auditing and assessment before I talk about implementing security technology. So let me explain that part first. Uh, Most organizations are not building security from the ground up. Most have done something. Maybe you think you have a firewall. Maybe you do have a firewall. Maybe you have a router. Maybe you installed antivirus software. Maybe um, you hired some tech person some time ago to do some things. So you have something in place. And what I am suggesting by talking about the auditing or assessment first is to let's figure out what it is that you already have in place. So then we can go back and we can add to it. I would hate for you to spend money on technology, on a firewall, on some sort of security solution when in reality you don't need that. And whether you're listening to me on 10 at 10 or you're at a conference or you're somewhere and there's always the next gadget, the next piece of software, the next piece of technology that's going to uh, be the product to have. There's always going to be that product. I would argue that you need to approach your technology solutions in a very methodical way, thinking through what do you need to actually accomplish the goals that you have. So, what are your goals? Well, we talked the very first week about having a policy, about having a strategy, about knowing what it is that you're protecting and what you need to do. So that policy should drive all your technology solutions. So why don't we think about those goals and assess how does our current situation look as compared to those goals? Then we can think about what technology that we should implement or how we should implement that technology. Hopefully that makes a little bit of sense. So that was first. I wanted to make sure that we understood what those differences are. And then second, there's a question I always get asked. Do you audit or do you assess? Am I going to do a audit or am I going to do an assessment? And the answer is maybe one, maybe the other, maybe both. So in some cases, it will make sense. And I want to explain what the difference in audit and assessment is, or at least from my perspective. Um, Sometimes you will need to do an audit, sometimes you can just do an assessment. So, first of all, an assessment, audit versus assessment. Assessment is can be conducted by an internal team or an external team. In my mind, an assessment is a check in advance of, in preparation for a security audit. It's a high level looking at compliance. It examines network security, disaster recovery, protections, general data security. It looks at all these things, but it looks at it almost a self assessment in some cases. And what I mean by that is as we look at auditing, auditing is a much more formal thing. Auditing is a very formal. We are measuring against the HIPAA requirements. Um, there are formal standards that we must comply with, and our audit is to see the compliance of our systems to that component. So, as I'm saying, a third party auditor, that is qualified or certified, is who does an audit. It is the check, as I just said. It's the check of compliance with a set of external legal standards or guidelines. And I use the example of HIPAA. It examines all technology controls, policies, and procedures. So, which one do you need? Which one makes sense for you? Well, the reality is you may not need a audit right now. If you don't know what standard you're auditing against, then you probably don't need an audit right now. If you're if you're just in your infancy of security development at your organization, then do an assessment. It's probably cheaper, but you can assess where you're at today and help you make strategic decisions down the road. If you are a business that is looking to get into a particular area where audits might be required down the road, then what I would recommend is use that assessment to get your house in order so that in 6 months, in a year, you're going to be in a position to to audit your strategy against a framework or a legal requirement that you may have. I hope that makes sense. So, if you're new to this, if you're just getting started, assessment is probably where you start. So, what I would recommend you think about is that you have your policy in place, you have your password strategy in place, you've done some user training. Now let's assess where our technology is, where our users are, so that then we know how to make that proper investment into the security of our organization. Um, that should be pretty straightforward. It's not always that straightforward. There's some assessment tools that are actually pretty simple to use. Uh, that it is something that you might be able to do yourself. More likely, you hire at a lower fee than what an audit would be, some external folks to come in and help you with that. What they will give you is here's a report. Some of these software packages actually will produce the report for you. Um, Here's the vulnerabilities, the things that we see, the things that you should consider. Sometimes they'll do the basic, green, yellow, red on severity. The red ones you need to do immediately, yellow, kind of mid-range time frame, and green in the next few years. Um, for for me, if you're a small business, if you're a small organization that's listening to this, that's what I would recommend. That's where I would start. I would start with that. Now, beyond that, what else could you do? Well, there are a whole host um, of things that you could do. I mean, this screen has some of those frameworks, things to audit against, things that you can do. There are plenty of standards, whether it's HIPAA, PCI, GDPR, CCPA, some of those frameworks. FERPA is not even on this, but is one. There are plenty of those requirements that you have to follow depending on the industry that you're in. There are requirements that are there. If you're in healthcare, you have to follow HIPAA. Um, if you're doing business in California, you have to follow the California Consumer Privacy Act. You have to. If you're doing work with residents of Europe, you have to follow GDPR. So there's a lot of those that you can follow and that perhaps maybe you should follow. And once you get past the assessment, once you get some technology uh, and security technology implemented into your network, then you can go back and you can look at more of an audit framework of what is it that we need to do. And honestly, if you're not sure what framework to use, here's one that I'll show you. This is the NIST cybersecurity framework. Um, it's very basic. Each of these standards, each of these areas break down, and you can learn more about it. Perhaps I'll do a video just on this at some point. But each item underneath that framework can be broken down to show how it connects to other standards, ISO standards, CSI, COBIT. I mean, there's a lot of standards that it connects with and aligns with. But the point is, I want you to first assess your organization, get it in a position where you can start to implement technology and make wise investment decisions based on your needs, then we can start thinking about auditing against standards. If you want a standard, the NIST framework is one that makes sense that you can use right now. It is a cybersecurity framework that was built for organizations to follow. It's a great opportunity. But um, if you're just getting started, let's walk before we can run. Let's get started, and start making those investment decisions wisely. Last thing I'll say, and I know I'm running long today, is this gets complicated. Assessment, auditing, technology investment, you start to spend money. If you're a small organization that doesn't necessarily understand all of these things, then I would recommend that you reach out to a third party. There are technology integrators. There are some really good MSPs that can help with some of these things. Reach out to me. I can connect you with some of those folks. But this is an important piece. Once we start spending money, once we start doing some of these things, it's important that we make sure that we implement these things in a secure way to keep your business, your organization, and even your family protected. I went through a lot of information really fast. I hope that made sense. And I'll see you back here next week on 10 at 10. Thank you. Bye.